Hello everybody, Nubkeks here, and welcome to a video where I'm going to respond to your comments. It's a new type of video really, new structure, so do let me know what you think of the idea of this video in general. But yeah, I made a video on Tyrande discussing the hero design, and particularly making the argument of why I think her owl build, her owl talent build, is at the moment an example of bad design that is, it's anti-fun, it's not fun to play against. So I recorded that yesterday, published it last night, and woke up this morning to a whole load of comments. There's massive amounts of comments, massive amount of debate back and forth. So I thought it would be make for an interesting video to dive into that and to actually reply directly to some of your comments. I decided the most fair way to do it is I'm just going to answer the top 10 comments. And yeah, we'll see how that works. I thought that would be kind of fair and the most fair and interesting way to do it. There's obviously more I would have liked to respond to, or particular ones, but I'm not going to do that. I think the most fair way is just the top 10. If I do it in future, I might do top 5. I'm not sure. Again, open to feedback on that. All right, so let's dive into it. The first comment is from Koopas. He says, "I can hear you talking in the video in the background. It's a bit distracting. You might consider removing its audio altogether in this series." I definitely take that on board. I mean, the intent, and in hindsight, it was a bad intent, was to not have the words be audible, but rather kind of the tone of those background videos be audible, so that if something exciting happened in the video, you might get a more excited tone coming across a bit in the background to make it a bit more engaging if you were watching the video. Like I said, in hindsight, I think it's a bad idea because, again, my intent as well with this was that the visuals would not be an essential component of that particular video at all. So I think, that it could function alone as an audio piece. And I think then there's a conflict if you've got additional audio in the audio piece that requires the visual to be understood. So I think that's kind of unnecessary clutter. So yeah, I think in the future I probably will just simply remove the audio. I mean, maybe if I had just obviously what I did for the background videos, and that was I just searched my channel for Tyrande videos, and I chose two, one of the new Tyrande, one of the old one. So, in future, if I use just like a raw gameplay video with no commentary, perhaps I could leave that in, very quiet. But again, I think perhaps for this series, I might even just mute them entirely and just kind of keep it simpler so that you can, like I said, and my intent was that you could stick it on like a second screen, or, just stick it on in the background while you're playing a game yourself, or, while you're walking, kind of more of a podcast type video. So having no gameplay sound would mean that you could play your own game and not have it interfering, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's obviously it's the most upvoted comment by a big margin. So yeah, that's obviously pretty important to take that on board. The next comment is from Rourke Kaufman, who says, "I disagree entirely. It's a narrow skill shot that's hard to hit. The counterplay is to properly be moving while in lane. LOL." I think this raises an interesting point in the sense of what's the appropriate amount of counterplay, or not? What's the appropriate response that an ability ought to bring up from a player? Like, is it appropriate to be constantly like moving and constantly juking a Tyrande owl throughout the entire game? Because it's a basic ability, it's global. Should you, for a basic ability, have to constantly think about it and constantly be trying to make it difficult for Tyrande to hit on a basic ability? I would argue not really. I think Chromie is a good comparison, right? Because with Chromie, obviously, when you're against a Chromie in lane, it's massively important that you do move erratically, that you do position correctly to make it difficult for Chromie to hit the skill shots, or to have to make choices such as hitting the hero, hitting you with Dragon's Breath instead of hitting the minion wave for wave clear. You want to, it's a massive part of the gameplay, and counterplay Chromie is doing that. However, with Chromie, that's a localized response. It's not a global thing, right? It's only when you are in lane against Chromie that you want to be moving erratically, right? And also, on top of that, those abilities, it's basically all Chromie does, right? She does these two artillery attacks. That's Chromie, for the most part. That's Chromie. However, with Tyrande, throwing out those owls isn't all of what Tyrande does. In fact, it's only a very small part, because at the same time she's also doing these heals. She also has a stun, she has a mark with vulnerability, and she's got basic attacks, which are fairly impactful. So Tyrande's doing a lot of things that aren't simply the owl, whereas with Chromie, you know, Chromie throwing out her skill shot attacks is the vast majority of what Chromie does. So the amount of counterplay, the amount of mental effort you have to put into playing against Chromie, I think is appropriate because it's responding to the majority of what she does, and it's responding to her when she's close to you. Whereas if you had to put in a similar amount of effort to dealing with Tyrande owls, which are only a small part of what she does and are global, they can come from anywhere, that would be bad game design in my opinion, right? I think that's important to know. I think Azmodan's another good example where you know, he does have that much longer range, but again, I would say, you know, the Azmodan dunks are a much larger part of what Azmodan does. They're also not quite global, they're long range. So, you know, if you're investing a sizable amount of effort into being aware of those and dodging those is more appropriate, because again, with Azmodan, especially, you know, it's really the Blackpool empowered dunks that you're being aware of, which is his heroic. So it's his heroic plus his most important basic ability, you know, so being aware of that and investing and responding to it makes sense. I think it doesn't make sense to have to devote a lot of mental effort to dodging owls from Tyrande. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, like, obviously this is you know, just randomly moving, as opposed to, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, you know, like, as in, are you just talking about just moving randomly, or talking about moving with intent, like to dodge it? Two different things. But yeah, just in terms of if that was, if the meaning is that, you know, you should be moving with intent, should you have to think about this as an ability? I don't think so. I think that's silly for a basic ability. It doesn't make sense that you would have to devote that much attention to it. Next question, or comment, excuse me, is from Sarah Wiersba. So apologies as well if I mispronounce any names. I do my best. So, are you going to complain about Valeera being unfun to play against next? So some of the HOTS community cries about something being unfun to play against. Deal with it. Oh, okay. That is what exactly got Valeera nerfed to shit tier. Even you know that. Oh, that's a lovely comment. Thank you, Sarah. No, so, all right. If you think, well, first of all, am I going to complain about Valeera? No, I wasn't planning to. I might talk about Valeera, because again, I think there's a lot of interesting game design stuff going on there with stealth heroes in general. I don't have any particular thoughts on it right now, but yeah, I might do something, but I'm not planning on that being the next thing. There's other game design things that would stand out to me as being more interesting or relevant, at least at the moment. But I'll try to do something. I know you're being sarcastic, but I'll probably will try to talk about that at some stage in the future. Some of the HOTS community crying about something being unfair to play against, deal with it. I mean, two things here. First of all, you know, the whole deal with it thing, it's like you're telling someone to just, you know, just shut up and just deal with it, just peacefully. You know, don't make comments about it, but then you're making a comment about something. I mean, the obvious response is, of course, you know, why don't you just deal with it instead of making a comment? You know, it's a little bit hypocritical there, but anyway. In response, though, to the general concept here, if the community cries about something being unfun, I think there's a misconception as to, well, obviously it's kind of fair, because I've only did one video on the series, but to make it more clear, the purpose of this series, in particular these ones, talking about heroes that are unfun, or that are more important, actually more accurately, there you go, I've actually misled you guys, is that I want to talk about things that people consider to be unfun, or that I consider to be unfun, and kind of diving into that. That doesn't mean that I'm always going to agree. I might go, okay, hang on. For example, I'm going to talk about Overwatch, and I don't feel anywhere near as strongly about Overwatch heroes as a lot of the community do. In fact, I think that some of them are actually fine, which other people have a big issue with. So in that sense, I'll be diving into that video and talking about, okay, these are heroes, people think they're unfun, let's dive into the design and let's see if they actually are or not. And that's something that I plan to do. So basically, if people are saying that something is unfun, I think it's a very good, and my way of dealing with it, I think it's a good way, is to make a discussion video, diving into it and kind of breaking it down and analyzing it. I think it's a good topic if it's you know, a popular topic, a controversial topic, but I'm not committed to falling on either side of the debate. I'm perfectly willing to play devil's advocate to either side. So yeah, and I do think as well, to bring up another point that might be raised by this. I think it is a worthwhile point of discussion if something is perceived to be unfun, because I mean the game is supposed to be fun, right? It's supposed to be something that you enjoy doing. That's like the core of it. So if there's something that is being very unfun for a lot of people, I think that is something that is a concern. Of course it is. And you know, Blizzard's not going to get everything perfect. They will make mistakes. It's a very big game. It's a very complicated game. They will make mistakes, and they have made mistakes in future. They have struggled a lot with certain hero designs. Tassadar, Kael'thas spring to mind as heroes that have been majorly changed many times, and I will enjoy talking about those. So you know, I think feedback is a valuable thing to bring. All right, next comment is, how many have we done? I think I've done 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. So this is 4, 5. All right. Torax Reborn. LOL. I totally disagree with Owl being more broken than triple tap. That should be first thing you should be aware going into a fight against Tyrande. Don't get how as an Owl. I don't get how an Owl, which is a pure skill shot you can just move out of, can be more annoying compared to a triple tap. Yeah, again, so this was what I talked about in the video a lot, which is the idea of response time and counterplay, and that with the Owl, there's not an awful lot of room for those things. There's not a lot of room for those things, whereas with the triple tap example I gave, I think there's an awful lot of time to respond. You know, once the triple tap, obviously you can't really reactively prepare to it very well. If Nova wants to triple tap you, she's basically going to be able to triple tap you. You can't really stop it. However, there's counterplay to it because it takes a long time to channel. Number one, you can interrupt her, you can dive her if she's close. If she's far away, you can obviously put structures in your way, other heroes can block it. So I do think there is some counterplay there. I mean, it does raise an interesting point though, these sort of point and click hard-hitting abilities I think is really interesting in terms of game design, because these can be big problem abilities. I think Kael'thas Pyroblast is an interesting ability I would like to talk about more somewhere. But obviously Pyroblast, it comes out, you know the Pyroblast is coming. There's no way to dodge it. There's no way to block it. So very oftentimes with Kael'thas Pyroblast, you know, unless your healer has a big heal available, and they might not, you know, you might just be kind of running around for a few seconds and then you die. So I think Blizzard has obviously done a few very important things in terms of talent tuning, you know, to make that work. I think that's a really interesting discussion point as well. There's so many drawbacks to Kael'thas Pyroblast that make it, you know, to try to mitigate that fact that it's this really hard hitting ability that's coming. You know, what if you have a healer that can't heal it up and you don't have a mitigation? You know, that could be. It has the potential, that ability, to be incredibly annoying, but it's not too bad because of the balance things they put into it. I think crucially, as far as I can remember in recent history, you know, at least last year, maybe even 2 years, you know, Pyroblast is not being considered a good heroic because there's so many drawbacks. So I think that does play a role in that. But I'll talk about that more in detail because I've got a lot to say about it, and I've not really explained it very well here. There's too much to talk about here, but I'll come back to it. But yeah, obviously things that hit you hard that you can't, hard that you can't dodge or can't do anything about do have an element of frustration. I think triple tap's not too bad at all though, because number one, it doesn't even hit that hard, and you've got plenty of time to block it in one way or another. Plenty of time to be healed up as well because it doesn't hit that hard. So yeah, I think that makes it okay. Right, the next question is Joshua Henderson. He says, the counter is watching your minimap and clicking to move. Yeah, so I got a lot of comments on this. A lot of people don't understand how OWL works. So I actually didn't check this, but as far as I am aware, when it's on your team, you can of course see the owl traveling across the minimap. You can see everything. However, when it's the enemy Tyrande that casts an owl, you can only see the owl on your minimap when you have vision of the owl skill shot itself. So while it's going through the fog of war, you have no vision of it whatsoever. So it's totally legitimate that you could be on your way, again, like I gave 2 example situations in the last video, and one was you're on your way up to the objective. Let's say you're going to the top shrine, Infernal Shrine, you're coming up, and then from the fog of war to the south of you, up comes an owl and cuts through your team. You've got no warning that it's coming until it literally appears on your screen and be coming from an angle you're not aware of, and it gets hit. Again, I would say in that situation, the Tyrande's got herself in a particular position which has sort of counterplay, so that's not as bad. But the crucial point here is that you cannot see it on your minimap unless you have vision of the ability itself, and oftentimes it will only appear when you have like a second or so to react, which is a very small amount of time. There's also the issue that you don't constantly watch the minimap. In fact, there's a rhythm to watching the minimap. Again, this is something I think is worth discussing. So I know, for example, I know Palatine did a video a while ago where he was talking about he was using a program, because I saw that a couple of people were asking me about it, which is how I saw it. But I think it played like a beep every 5 seconds or something. It was going to like look at your minimap every 5 seconds, which it's certainly okay. But I mean, just in terms of the rhythm of watching your minimap, there's obviously times in Heroes of the Storm where you won't even look at your minimap at all. For example, in the midst of a big 5v5 team fight, because it's not particularly important in that sense. There's much more valuable things to be gained from watching the fight itself and the abilities and the movements and reactions. Whereas then there are times where you want to be looking at the minimap almost constantly and not looking at your hero at all. I think, again, a classic example of this would be, let's say I'm split pushing, we're on Sky Temple, I'm split pushing top as ETC, there's 5 enemy team members down bottom with no globals, and then my 4 allies, and they're posturing around that bottom temple. I'm basically going to spend 99% of that time looking at the minimap, perhaps even having my camera down on the enemy team, so I don't need to look at the minion wave to be effective. And there's no heroes there for me to watch. It's totally predictable, so all my attention will be constantly basically directed down to the bottom. I just need to make sure I don't walk into a fort or something and get shot, but I'm just watching what's happening on the minimap to be ready to respond to that. So there's different times when watching your minimap at different amounts is appropriate. And again, I come back to the question I raised earlier, which is it appropriate for a basic ability of a hero that's a small part of their core kit? Is it appropriate that you would have to be constantly aware of it and constantly watching out for it to dodge it? I would say no. I would say no. I think it's more appropriate with a heroic, but it's less appropriate with a basic ability. That just doesn't make sense from game design perspective. Kuro Shinru says, grab the popcorn, use all the salt in the comments to flavor it. The shit design, deal with it. Again, obviously I agree with this one. We still have that whole deal with it thing. That's one of, I get these comments a lot on a lot of things. I always get these like deal with it comments. It's a bit silly, I think. Obviously he agrees with me, so kudos for that. But yeah, and there's a lot of there's a lot of salt in the comments. There's no doubt about that. Dalamaris 411. I think there's plenty of counterplay to Tyrande. There's a minimap icon showing the travel path, the owl, just like a rag, lava wave, or Hammer's ult. Again, this is incorrect. This is just incorrect. Like I said, you can see, I'm almost certain that you can see the owl travel path. Well, you don't see the travel path. You see the owl skill shot in the direction it's going all the time when you're on the ally team, when you're on the Tyrande's team. But I'm fairly certain of that, almost 100%. And I am 100% certain that when you're on the enemy team, you only see the owl when it is within, when the ability itself is within vision range of you. Again, I think to Ragwave, it's totally different from Ragwave. First of all, you've got obviously massive cooldown differences. Ragwave is like 5 or 6 times, 7 times maybe even the cooldown, massively long cooldown. But Ragwave, there's this massive verbal cue. What's he say, like die insects or by fiery something like, I don't even know. But he shouts it out that everyone can hear, and then you do see, regardless of vision, you see the lava wave moving along the map. So that's totally different from the owl, because there's no audio cue, and there's no within fog of war icon on the minimap. And again, there shouldn't be. It would be, again, like I said, as a basic ability, it would be ridiculous if every time Tyrande threw her owl, she shouted, die insect, and you saw this owl flying across the map. That would be stupid, of course, because it's a basic ability. It shouldn't have that much weight. There's a very interesting video on audio design in Heroes of the Storm, which I really encourage people to watch. It was really fascinating, when it talks about how Blizzard uses audio cues to transmit an awful lot of information in the game. So yeah, having an obvious audio cue for something is only appropriate, when it's a very important ability. I mean, I'd say Illidan is another good example, where there's obviously a huge audio cue to the hunt. And it's more dramatic if you are the target of the hunt yourself, to make sure that even if your camera's not looking at your hero, that you are aware that Ilden is hunting on you. That's a very intentional game design choice. And it's appropriate that there is that much of an audio cue, because, you know, it's a massive ability. It's his heroic ability. And also, you know, it's a hero that is about to jump across the map onto your hero. So that's incredibly important. You know, there's an awful lot of gameplay ramifications to that. Same thing with Lava Wave. It's appropriate because it's a massive cooldown and it has a massive impact on the course of the game. Not as much. They nerfed it a lot, but it still has a pretty big impact. So it's appropriate with those. It wouldn't be appropriate to have a big audio cue for an owl because the owl's thrown out every 15-20 seconds. So that would just be silly if there's an audio cue. There shouldn't be, because the basic ability shouldn't have that much of an impact. It's not that important, or ought not to be that important. So yeah. Regarding Hammer's ultimate, I'm not actually sure, to be honest with you, because I've barely seen Hammer being played recently, so I can't quite remember. And I didn't have I went and I checked the owl thing to be sure. I don't have a recent video playing against a Hammer that I'm aware of that I can respond to regarding Hammer's ultimate. I'm, again, almost 100% sure that when she has the level 20 upgrade, you can of course see the path. The skill shot itself, and I think the path as well, regardless of team, something like that. I'm actually not sure. Again, I suspect that it's much like Tyrande's owl, that you only see the cast animation, hear the audio cue for the ability being cast if you can actually see the Hammer, if you're actually looking at Hammer at the time and can see her. And again, I think like Tyrande's owl, I think you only see the skill shot indicator on the map when you've got vision of it, just the default. Not 100% sure though. So number one, Hammer's almost never played these days, and number two, she often chooses the other heroic, so I don't actually know. The next comment is from Vladis Vladi. Love the owl build for Tyrande. I don't think it ruins the game. For starters, Hammer's ulti at level 20 will take keeps by itself and clears lanes by itself. That seems pretty cheese. Crummy rework now allows her to pierce and multicast skill shots into a single person to insta-gib someone, just like Kel'Thuzad. So two things here. First of all, like I said, so I just mentioned the Hammer ultimate at level 20. It certainly is, you know, it's cheesy for sure. Again, one big difference I would say between the Tyrande and the Hammer is that Tyrande is doing this owl stuff and has that owl, the talent I think is particularly bad from level 1. Whereas, of course, Hammer only can do this at level 20. So that is something, that's quite a significant difference, because a lot of games don't even get to level 20. So just in terms of how frequently it happens and occurs, it's much less frequent. Certainly, there's no argument, I think, that Hammer's level 20 is cheesy. It's certainly that. Chromie rework, now allowing her to pierce and multicast skill shots into a single person to insta-skip someone, just like Kel'Thuzad. So I think this is really interesting, because some stats there for you, by the way. I think by accident. I think I did. I obviously addressed this quite a lot in the video, which is that Blizzard has explicitly nerfed Chromie's ability to insta-gib someone. That's something they specifically dealt with by changing her Sandblast ability. Is that they actually limited, they nerfed her ability to insta-gib someone. So you're saying that they've made it easier to do this. That's actually not true at all. They've made it an awful lot harder. Because your Q just simply doesn't hit as hard. The Bronze talent isn't quite as valuable. So especially early game Chromie, there's an awful lot of gameplay, an awful lot of power pre-Chromie rework. It's still there, but not as strong, that you get level 8, you temporal loop someone, and then you blow them up and kill them. I mean, you can still do that, but it's not as strong, because your Q doesn't hit as hard. So yeah, but again, I do think, like I said as well, I think that Chromie and Burst Mages in particular, there's always a concern there. I mentioned Kel'Thuz in this video of them being anti-fun. Why? Because you know, being blown up in like the space of a second, half a second, can be extremely frustrating. So I mean, that's I could easily do a video talking about mages. I think the crucial point here is that the Chromie rework is actually, like, sure, she can pierce. Again, that's something that happens later in the game, but sure. But the bigger idea is that the Chromie rework is actually limited to your ability to burst someone, to burst a single person. You can get, obviously, the skill shot reset on your traps, but it requires you to hit the trap. And that also, that's on the same, I could be wrong, I think it's on the same talent tier as Bronze Talents. So, yes, you get to cast your skills again. Well, it refreshes their cooldown. but you don't have bronze talent, so that limits the burst there as well. So just a couple of things there. Buckley Smash says, I agree completely. Seen an Abathur get one shot by an owl. How is that fun? Again, I don't think this is too bad, actually. I don't think that's too bad. Abathur getting one shot by an owl. I think number one, for Tyrande to stack enough damage to one shot Abathur would have to happen. That would be fairly late, or it ought to be fairly late in the game. I think if she was one-shotting Abathur from, like, you know, within the first 5 minutes at least, even within the first 10 minutes, I think that would be very anti-fun. That would be really bad, obviously. I hope people would agree with that. I think, you know, once it gets very late game and she has a lot of stacks, if she's able to one-shot Abathur, I don't think it's as bad. Because number one, again, like I said, I think something... Anti-fun is something that you've got no counterplay or no way to prepare for. I think, you know, if Tyrande is going to be one-shotting you late, like in the very late game, I think it's not so bad because you've plenty of time to prepare for it. You're well aware. Also, as Abathur, you can, obviously, if you're going up against a Tyrande, you would say, best not go for, let's say, the sort of Locust build, which requires me to be deeper down in the lane, because there is always this risk that Tyrande owls can hit me, they could interrupt a Hearthstone, they could give vision, which could get me killed. So I'm going to spec into an Abathur spec, a talent spec, that's less reliant on positioning deeper down the lanes, particularly in the late game, to get value. So I think you've got some response there in terms of talent build, which is something. Also, you know, moving out as Abathur is inherently risky. And again, this is something I would say in terms of game design and in terms of like I already mentioned, what abilities you should be giving your attention to. It's not normally appropriate, I would say, to give a vast amount of attention to an ability that is, you know, global. That's a basic ability. It shouldn't be that powerful. I think with Abathur, it's different because you are inherently very much focused on the map as Abathur. And, you know, just because you are that squishy, vulnerable hero that has the ability to move deep down in lanes, when you do move deep down in a lane, I think it is appropriate that the Tyrande owl would be a big threat to you, because obviously that's the sort of thing that you should be playing around, right? It makes sense that, you know, a Tyrande owl should be a threat to you when you move down the lane as an Abathur. It's something that you ought to be aware of. You can also position in slightly unorthodox places as an Abathur and make sure you're not within vision. You stand back a little bit. That's some counterplay there. So I think it does make sense. I think it's more appropriate as Abathur to be aware of the owls, because there's nothing much else for you to be aware of. And that whenever you do move, you know, late game, you're either going to be in, you can stay in your Hall of Storms where you're safe. If you do move down the lane, you're already dedicating a massive amount of attention to the map and to being aware of where enemy heroes can be and their globals, because that's inherent to the gameplay that you're doing as Abathur. So it does make sense to me that you should be more aware of the owl, and therefore the owl ought to have a bigger impact on you in that sense, relatively. The next comment is from Evil Nero, says Garrosh is anti-fun. Again, that's a hero I might talk about for sure. Yeah, I could see Garrosh being one that's worth diving into and discussing. And that might be 10 comments, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I should prepare this more. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that was 10 exactly. Good. All right, well, there you go. I think that's enough to talk about here in this video. This actually ended up being really long. I'm just thinking it's about half an hour long, so went on a bit longer than I intended, but hopefully it was very interesting. And for people like me who are as interested in the game design and like a more in-depth understanding of what's going on in the game and why things work the way they do, I hope this was like an interesting discussion for you guys. And like I said, let me know any feedback you have on the structure of the video. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What could be changed? What should stay the same? And so on and so forth. Did you like it? Let me know. And yeah, I will catch you guys next time for more Heroes of the Storm. Thanks for watching. Oh, I do have some like obviously this is like 2 discussion videos in a row, which is quite a lot, I suppose. But I will of course have, you know, the live streams this week, and I have some gameplay videos and a couple of more kind of focused broad appeal guides as well. So don't worry about that. There is more stuff coming out that's kind of more broadly perhaps appealing. So yeah, that stuff will be coming out too, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.